Colleagues, we'll start in just a moment. Steve Hillier, it's lonely to be you, man, I'm telling you. All right, so colleagues, welcome to the 5th meeting of the SPPC. City of London announcement for the gallery. The City of London is committed to making every effort to provide alternate formats and communication supports for council, standing, or advisory committee meetings and information upon request. To make a request for any city service, please contact accessibilitylondon.ca or 519-661-2489, extension 2425. To make a specific request to this meeting, please contact sppc@london.ca. I said it was for the gallery, but it's also for anyone through streaming who is paying mind to this and would like that information supported. I'll look for any disclosures of pecuniary interest. Deputy Mayor Helmer.
On item 2.2, the City of London service review for municipal golf, I declare a pecuniary interest as my dad is employed by the National Golf Course Owners Association and the City of London is a member.
So noted. Any other disclosures? Seeing none. We have two items on the consent agenda. 2.1, the service review of municipal user fees, and the City of London service review of service delivery for municipal golf. Before I look for a mover and seconder, is there anyone wishing to deal with these separately? Either of these items? I guess 2.2 by virtue of Deputy Mayor's comments. So that leaves 2.1 under the consent agenda. Is there a mover? Councillor Ploza, seconded by Councillor Squire. Any comments or questions on municipal user fees? Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. It's mentioned in the report that there's going to be a report sometime in Q3 2020 about the development services fees. And I just want to make sure when we think that might be happening, and is that going to be a sort of standalone report? Is it going to get rolled into the overall adjustments to user fees that happen once a year?
Let's refer that to staff.
Through the chair, so we're working through that right now and starting to look at how we might do that, but I believe it will be a standalone report that would come out prior to the setting of the budget in time for the user fees to come forward for the 2021 update. That's what we're working towards at this point in time.
Any other comments or questions on 2.1? Councillor Van Holst.
Thank you. A lot of information in the report, and I wanted to inquire of our fire chief about the suggestion that we might be able to cut down the number of free false alarms and maybe get a little more information from her or insight about some of the places where there's many alarms coming again and again, and what perhaps the impacts would be of that change.
I see Chief Hamer here. Would you like to give us some insights into that, please?
Through the chair. So the false alarms for years has been at quite a high number of free false alarms, which is why we're looking to strategically lower that number over the next few years, along with a bit of a communication strategy to citizens of London's business owners, et cetera, so that it's not a huge shock when the cost goes up, but as well if the number goes down for free false alarms. There's a few different camps around your question with regard to places with lots of false alarms. So we do have the traditional hospitals, universities, colleges. That group we tend not to charge for because of the liability on the other side. There's a fine line between charging them, and then you don't want to encourage behavior that's then could be dangerous for the students and the people in the hospital, et cetera. Around the business owners, we do charge on the first false alarm if people just blatantly have a false alarm and do not notify us at all. So we've started that, and we've started that with a a campaign strategy as well to try and cut down on the businesses that have a lot of false alarms. And a lot of those are due to the fact that business owners, landlords, et cetera, don't get technicians in to fix the alarm in a timely manner, which causes it to trip the alarm over and over and over again, causing us to send vehicles across the city, and it's not needed. They need to get people in to fix that alarm.
Councillor?
Thank you very much. That's a valuable point. My other question is about the sending of multiple vehicles. So there's a suggestion that when more vehicles go, it should be a higher rate. If I was a business and there was a false alarm, I would be disappointed perhaps if there were 3 vehicles there. But if I was a small business, so how do we decide how many vehicles will attend an alarm?
Chief?
Through the chair, we put together those response algorithms for the city from a City of London perspective while looking at other departments in Ontario as well. And we have made the determination that we would send 5 for a false alarm and 6 if it's a high rise. You may see that change or the recommendation change when the master fire plan comes through the end of this year, depending on the different variables that come into play. But for now, for us, it's 5 and 6. And if you base that on the MTO rate, it would be a substantial additional cost for business owners for false alarms. If we were to go to that level using a cost per vehicle, it would have to be a communication strategy to people to let them know in 2021, 22, 23, et cetera, what that cost might look like. But I believe the difference in cost from $700 if we send 5 was around a $1,700 increase in the cost. So it's a large differential.
Councillor?
Thank you. And so we should suspect a report back on this, a strategy from the fire department on how you're going to proceed with this. You talked about cutting it down over time.
Chief, back to you.
Through the chair. Sorry. Through the chair.
You are not the chief.
No,
Please
I'm
go
not
ahead.
the chief. Through the chair, we will be coming in the spring with our comprehensive risk assessment, and this is the first phase of laying out the potential risks and where we're going in the City of London. Following that, we will be coming later in the year, probably around September, October, with our fire master plan. And as we discuss this, we'll lay out where we go forward, the resources we need, how we move forward for council to make some decisions on at that time.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair, for the responses from our guests and also for the research from KPMG.
Thanks very much. Councillor Pelosi.
Thank you. Just a question through you to staff, looking for clarification in regards of the analysis of fire services user fees for false alarms. We list the places that we don't do the nature facility and the factors of the university, the hospital, post-secondary. Just looking for clarification of how this applies to city assets, thinking about LMCH and other buildings we own. I know when I lived in rent geared to income buildings, we had a higher rate of getting visits, making sure that it's not like a budget item coming in and we're paying it back out, that the money stays within the facility that it was intended.
So through the chair, I'll start and then the chief can get into the details. But what we're proposing to come forward in the spring is with a detailed process and bylaw. And the bylaw then will provide authority to the fire chief or her designate to review the false alarm charges and where considered appropriate, waive the fee. So it will be on a case-by-case basis, but we'll come forward with that process and that bylaw for you to review in the coming months.
Ms. Pelosi? Thank you. Councillor Hopkins.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I've got a question around false alarms, and I am going to be looking forward to the report coming back and the process and how that's going to look like. I do have a question, though, as it relates to my iPhone and false alarms that can easily be had. Will you be looking at how, about some of our phones are kind of set up that if we accidentally touch them, I have done that in the past, and have had to quickly make a call. Will that be reviewed as well? I think there's a lot of us out there that can accidentally trip our phones.
I sense some fairly significant fines coming Councillor Hopkins' way. Fire Chief, do you want to take a charge of that, please?
Through the chair, so you're talking about the false 911 calls that happened. So 911 goes to police dispatch first, and then we're a downstream agency from there. So it would be at police that all those 911 calls are taken, and they do, I can tell you, they do get a lot of them, and it takes resources to go and check on each one of those false alarms.
Councillor.
I guess my question would be better had with police services, but thank you for that.
We can ask that for you on behalf of Police Services Board at the right time. Any other comments or questions then for our colleagues with respect to 2.1? Councillor Cassidy.
Thank you, Your Worship. So on page 16 of the report, there's an overview of the city's user fees and compares to other the comparable municipalities. So I'm looking at the corporate operational and council services and financial management services, and I see quite a difference between London and the comparators, where the non-taxation revenue is a percentage of operating costs. So London appears to be quite low in this category compared to the others. So wonder if you could give me, through you, Your Worship, to staff, some idea of what revenue is coming in, both for London and other municipalities in this category.
Ms. Smith, do you want to tackle that, or shall we give that to Ms. Barbone? Ms. Barbone, when you have a moment.
Through the chair, so I think this was really as part of the initial work that was done to identify where they might look further. So because that did have a number of others, it was really trying to identify how they could flag what areas that the review was going to focus on. So I don't believe we have that specific information unless KPMG is able to answer that and has those notes ready with them now. It certainly wasn't flagged because I think there were a number of different areas within that as a whole. It might appear low, but I think one of the key areas and contained with that is taxation, which they did in fact review as one of the most significant areas. The other ones might be low in comparison just because they're smaller streams that add up to a larger amount particularly. I'm just gonna check to see if they have other details specifically on what the other areas might particularly have if KPMG is able to answer that question.
Thank you. I see a nod in the negative, so they're either very shy or nothing else to add with your thoughtful response. Anything else for you, Treasurer?
No, I think really this was the high level that it was initiated to really identify what the key areas were that we were going to look at. And then based on this was really the foundational to identify the three elements, which was the taxation, the fire services, as well as the building area to look forward into. So that one is obviously still coming, but certainly those were the two ones that the main focus was primarily to do the deep dive into for this purpose of the review.
Thank you. Councillor Cassidy.
Okay, so and on page 27, potential opportunities for consideration. Part C talks about some areas that we could consider for fee changes, but these were not included in the. So this is the KPMG report, but not included in where we're moving forward in the staff section of the report. So I'm wondering why we didn't consider user fees on these four bullet points under item C: inspection fees for premises with liquor licenses, response fee for natural gas leaks, fees for review of risk and safety management plans, and fees for family fireworks sales permits.
Ms. Bourbon. Ms. Smith, you're up.
So through the chair, when we reviewed the opportunities for consideration that KPMG put forward to us, we came back with, we saw, based on the scope and the abilities and the resources we had to identify two of the key main areas, which was reduce the number of false alarms from 5 eventually to 2 and slowly increase the fee. And I will let the chief speak to the specifics of each of the other ones. Do you want us, would you like us to go through each one, or were there a specific other opportunity you wanted us to look at?
Councillor?
I'm not necessarily looking for like great detail. I'm just wondering if since they were flagged by KPMG, and I just wondered, did the cost outweigh the perceived benefits, or just a quick answer like that will do?
Through the
Chief?
chair, when we were looking at some of the changes moving forward with the user fees, as we said, we did look at the false alarms and the money, because that was one that we knew we're already doing the work, so there was no staff implication around that one, and it could be increased user fees. Some of the other ones that are laid out, we'd have to look at what that looked like, and look at the safety of the citizens of London as well, because around the propane risk and fire safety plans, there's some different schools of thought on that, about whether it's better for us to have the information. And if we charge for the information, then are people going to be reluctant to come forward to give us the information because there's a charge associated with it?
Councillor? You're good? Any other comments or questions with respect to 2.1, any of the items? Seeing none, I'll turn your attention to the screen as we vote on 2.1. And specifically review of municipal user fees.
Closing the vote, motion carries 14-0.
Thanks very much, colleagues. Again, on the consent agenda item, but pulled for separate consideration, the London Service Review with respect to the service delivery for municipal golf. Probably appropriate to get a mover and seconder to put it on the floor, and then we'll discuss that and see where that goes. Is there a mover? Councillor Van Hol, seconded by Councillor Lehman. Comments or questions? Councillor Squire.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And I just have a question and then a comment. So my question would be, in addition to looking at the fact that a course may be losing money, will you also be looking at, and this is through the chair, at income opportunities that may mitigate that loss? Or have we sort of exhausted that possibility, and the loss is what the loss is, and we have to decide if we're going to continue to absorb it or not?
Mr. Stafford.
Through the chair, no, we haven't exhausted that. Hopefully, we will be looking at further sponsorship and marketing opportunities. We're also looking, as the report talks about and our master plan talks about, the opportunities to maximize year-round use at a facility like Thames Valley. It used to have a little more year-round use, and we'd like to look at that again as possibilities as well.
Councillor?
I have no problem with going forward and looking at it. I just think there's a lot of people here tonight, they may think we're making an actual decision tonight about doing something, and we're not being asked to do that. We're just looking at all the options and going ahead. I have no difficulty in doing that, as long as it's a fulsome examination of all the options with regard to those facilities. The only thing I do know, being a golfer myself, is that the income of golf courses has become somewhat difficult, and it's a fact of life. So I'm really looking forward to what comes back and what our options might be.
Mr. Stafford.
Through the chair, sorry, I don't think there's a question there. I think that was the commentary part.
I was going to give you a chance, though, to wax eloquent if you wanted to. If not, I'll go to Councillor Hopkins, please.
Thank you. And I do have a question through you, Mr. Chair, to staff. And I know there's a number of people here in the gallery that are wondering what the process is going to look for like going forward. And one of the recommendations is be a report back on option one. And option one from the KPMG report talks about the city would discontinue golf operations at Riverbend, which would eliminate so many golf holes in the course. And I really want to make sure that if the report is going forward, and option one is going to be looked at, that there is a process in place and what that process is going to look like. Are we going to be having the conversation to discontinue playing golf at River Road, or there will be other opportunities? I want to make sure that we're not deciding here tonight to stop golf on that course. I really think we need clarification and that public engagement. In other words, what is the question we're going to be asking of the public at the next PPM too? And what is that report going to look like? Are we going to be looking at possibility of even keeping the golf course and selling off some of the land? Just want to have a broader and a concise understanding to support option one, how it's going to look like going forward.
Mr. Stafford, your turn.
Through the chair, yes. The reason we're recommending a report back are there's several nuances to the KPMG report and several other things that we need to look at if we're going to go forward with option one. One thing is municipal survey of other places that own and operate golf courses, financial assumptions of the land value, costs and revenue projections of the selected options that we come up with, review of potential land uses and services. Several options could go forward in a report back. It could be the status quo. It could be to sell or lease of golf operations. It could be sell the land as suggested in the KPMG report. It could be repurposing for other municipal uses that may include a reduction in golf to a 12-hole golf option or a 9-hole golf option, soccer fields, trails, natural areas, parks, parkland, etc. So there are several options and several things that need to be looked at a little more thoroughly for you to make your decision. And that's what our intention is with the report back, so that we bring all of those back to you to better understand, along with maximizing revenue and different opportunities that Councillor Squire mentioned as well.
Councillor?
Yes, if I may, I think it's very important that the public understands that we are not just continuing golf at this course tonight. We'll have that broader conversation moving forward. So thank you for that information.
Thanks very much. Councillor Morgan.
Yes, I want to express my support for the recommendations in the report and the staff recommendations as outlined and moved by my colleagues for a couple of reasons. One, I do think it's fine to discontinue the pursuit of options 2, 3, and 4. I really think option 1 is the one to investigate. I also support what Mr. Stafford has said, is that there will be a process where things will be looked into, there'll be a report back, and of course, before we make any changes at all, we'll have a public participation meeting where we can engage with the stakeholders who use the service, as well as potential stakeholders for other options on the land, given the comments that Mr. Stafford stated, excuse me. And that really is the responsible way to go. This is one with a lot of stakeholders, the golf in the City of London, and so we shouldn't make any changes without a proper public participation meeting where people can weigh in with their opinions. So I support the recommendations because it includes all of that. Thank you. Councillor Lewis.
Thank you, Chair, and through you, since Councillor Hopkins actually asked the majority of my questions, I appreciate that because I did want to ask about the repurposing for other municipal uses. Will we also be looking in the broader terms about access and infrastructure around these lands? I mean, this is outside of my ward, but it's near my ward. I know some of my residents use this. What's clear to me is that the status quo is a problem. We have to take some direction. But when we talk about things like soccer fields, for example, the quality of River Road is, well, to call it a cow path when it's been raining hard might be a little bit generous. It's not in great shape. We don't have transit service out there. So I'm just wondering, as we're looking at all of our options, are we going to be also looking at the adjacent infrastructure in terms of public access when we're talking about the public options?
Mr. Stafford.
Through the chair, yes, as site evaluation as part of the process to determine where access points would be and what it would be best suited for. It's certainly part of the process when we develop sports fields or facilities of any sort to have a look at egress and access and ways for the customer to get there. So that's certainly something that'll be part of the review.
Councillor Lewis, we're good. Thank you. Councillor Van Meerbergen.
Thank you, Mayor Chair. I think we're in a very fortunate position that golf in London has paid for golf. It hasn't come from the tax base, and I think there's a lot of Londoners who don't realize that. They may look at this that, you know, it's kind of a frill that the tax base is paying for, and it's not. So golf has paid for golf, it has for years. Our job is to ensure, at least in my opinion, that it continues to pay for itself. And therefore, I think taking a look at some of these options for River Road, and indeed the whole system, but it seems River Road is somewhat problematic, is a useful exercise and useful information to come back to us. It may very well be that 12 holes is more efficient and will stop some of the bleeding, or maybe it's 9 holes or something different altogether. But I look forward to the report coming back, and I think this is a very positive step to keep golf paying for golf here in London.
Thank you. Councillor Pelosi.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just wondering about this one. Some residents have been writing in, which I appreciate because neither of these are in the south. None of them are in the south end of the city, directly by my ward. Reviewing the information, I see that the highest percentage of members who use unlimited golf memberships pick River Road. Wondering about the impact of the people who are using unlimited memberships when those people start using the other courses who are making more money and being more revenue generation. Is that going to take away some of the capacity they have to actually turn such a high profit because we put more unlimited members taking out those tee times?
Mr. Stafford.
Through the chair, annually we review user fees, have a look at the membership models, have a look at the distribution of members and how that fits, whether it be the unlimited model, there's weekday unlimited models, there's pay-as-you-go customers, and there's customers that it was typically a half fee after you've paid a certain amount of money. So we continue to look at those membership models to see ideally where they're at and how they can best not only maximize participation, but maximize revenue and maximize the customer experience. So it's all of those factors get factored in annually as we have a look, and as along with comparators of other golf properties and what they're doing and what other golf businesses are doing, what the market rates are. So all of those are factors that we look at and things that we adjust regularly.
Councillor.
Thank you. Just further thoughts that 2018 was the exception that it actually didn't revenue generate enough for it. Looking at the land use around it and of it, 11 acres for development, definitely interested in a conversation of just maybe reducing the hole count from 8 down to 9 holes. It may be an unusual, less desired portion that maybe other things couldn't be developed on to make sure we still serve some members in that area and still use it as a revenue generation. My only concern is with the wording in option 1. I'm learning about how we word things and a report comes back specific to the wording, and it's not necessarily always the intent that was behind it, that the city would discontinue, under this option, that the city would discontinue golf operations at River Road. I'm not seeing in there how it would allow us to look at potential reductions or moving and using the middle hole. I haven't golfed this course, or at least not in a long time, of the whole range that we would use. That I'm concerned that some things that have been mentioned here tonight of repurposing this area or holes isn't, to me, contained within this, as it strictly speaks to eliminating golf at River Road. So looking for clarification on, is that potential just reduction of holes actually considered in this motion?
Mr. Stafford.
Through the chair, the intent of the recommendation that we put forward to look at options on River Road were intended to solve or address all of those options that I mentioned earlier. So if we need to adjust the wording to make sure that that's more clear, but it was all of those options that include status quo all the way down to a complete repurposing. So it's intended to go and look at all of the options.
Councillor Pelosi.
With that being clarified, could I ask that we clarify the wording just as the public follows along and knows what we've done? If they just see the motion, they'll know that those options are still on the table with potential reduction, repurposing, or complete discontinued use of this course, that it's all being considered.
I'm wondering if that is then looking for an amendment to the recommendation, or Mr. Stafford, do you have some thoughts on that first?
Through the chair, I'd like to confer with the clerk on the wording. I'm at the mercy of the council with that.
Mercy is a big word. That's what happens when when my golf handicap is like 36, and it's actually a little worse, for the record, I want you to know. Which is why all the great golfers want me to golf with them, because they look so much better. So it really is that the pleasure of council. We want to make some adjustment to that recommendation. Councillor Pelosa, are you suggesting some, or are you looking for staff to assist us in that regard?
In my wisdom, I'll wait on the clerk.
The clerk has much wisdom. We'll wait for her return. It's a good day. Call Elise just a moment, please. While we're waiting for that motion to be approved, I would tell the councillor who's suggesting that at Banff Springs, I actually broke 100 once in my life, 99. Just thought I'd share that with you, just in the interest of golf stories. That was the best one I could ever tell. Imagine the gallery has all done that, but it was a first and only for me. So we're just getting the wording on this to take into consideration the councillor's thoughts on this. So it's been typed. In a moment, we're just going to ask you to refresh the motion as amended, but bear with me. Saying that, I'll look. Should be ready. All right, so take a look at that, but I'll look for a mover to this once you've seen it, to this amendment.
As long as the mover in the second.
So then we may leave you out of this process entirely, Councillor Pelosa. If the mover, Councillor Van Holst, is comfortable with that, and the seconder is as well, Councillor?
Yes.
You are? And your seconder on that? Councillor, are you comfortable with that? Please say so.
Yes, I am.
Thank you very much. Any comments? The clerk in her wisdom is going to just give us some detail as to what it is that you've just supported to move in second. Go ahead, clerk, please.
Your worship, after speaking with Mr. Stafford, he believes, or he has indicated option one includes all of the options that Councillor Pelosa spoke about. So what we did was add it being noted that option one, except the words option one are not in there, includes a review of all possible options for the future use of River Road Golf Course.
And once again, to be clear, Councillor Van Holst, you're comfortable, and Councillor Lehman, you're comfortable moving and seconding?
Absolutely.
Good. Yes. Thanks very much. Any other comments or questions? I have Councillor Lehman on the list here.
Thank you, Your Worship. A couple of things have been said, but I'm going to just say it as well. We've had a wonderful tradition of golf in the London area. I think that's demonstrated by the fact that it stayed in the report. We've had an 85-year history of municipal golf. But also it's been paid without any municipal tax subsidy, which is important. I think we have to continue on that vein. I'm glad to hear that there's a consideration of not just closing a golf course, but other things like maybe reducing number of holes, given a lot of the portion of the golf course is on floodplain. The chance for redevelopment is limited. I'm also glad that there will be a public participation meeting planned in the process before anything goes to committee or council for any final decisions. I'm also aware that there's been a 38% reduction in rounds played at River Road. And to continue on of golf pays for golf, we need to make sure also that our facilities are in top-notch shape for the enjoyment of people in the game and not to lead to further erosion of the sport. What I want to touch on as well is we see the people in the gallery who I'm sure are avid golfers. I'm making that assumption. What we don't see in the gallery are golfing juniors. The sport of golf is great for young people. It's one of the last sports that is done unsupervised. The nature of golf, it's self-supervised. Young people are introduced to a sport that people call penalties on themselves. It's 4 hours, 5 hours outside. So for the missing people golfing community up there, I just wanted to bring that to our attention. So while I understand the need for the review, I think it's something we should do very cautiously.
Thank you. I have no one else on the speakers list. I do so. I have Councillor Van Holst.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And some comments through you. I'm not sure how many people are here for golf, but I'm tempted to yell 4 and see how many duck. The point was made that the River Road is a little less popular over the last few years, but somebody had made a comment to me that there's a bit of a reduced popularity because they were dealing with some water restrictions. And so I wanted to ask through you to staff about that. Perhaps they could comment.
Thank you. Back to staff.
Through the chair, yes, there have been some issues certainly at River Road over the past couple of years. We had an environmental spill at River Road where we had to utilize a different water source, and that created some issues. Certainly location and the type of years we had the last couple of years actually with late springs and early falls have created issues, and the flooding at River Road is something that happens a little bit more than other locations. The quarry also experiences that. We're fortunate at some of the other courses that they drain quickly, but the River Road has that issue. But we did have a spill issue. We were able to get water onto the golf course, but that certainly affected some of the play over the last couple of years as well.
Councillor.
Okay, so I can see that part of the reason for a reduction in revenues is because of that consequence. I also wanted to ask if we've got this strategy of golf pays for golf, and that's, I think, a staff strategy. It's not a council policy, but it's nice to see when things are self-sufficient. But perhaps through you, ask if there's any unintended consequences of that policy that our staff might be able to fill us in on.
Mr. Stafford.
Through the chair, it's certainly something we've strived towards. It's something that's been mentioned a couple of times this evening. There were even times in the heyday of golf where it helped contribute through the years to other recreation programs, aquatics in particular. It helped to build and maintain. It is how the reserve fund is established. It's the money that's collected in golf goes into the reserve capital fund in order to make improvements to the courses. But it's challenging, and part of the reason the report is here today is that it's a challenge sustainable model. There's an infrastructure gap there. The clubhouses need repairs. The last couple of years we haven't been able to contribute to the reserve. There have been some healthy years and some years that are able to sustain the golf course itself. We put most of our money back into the golf course. That's where people play. It is golf. But it's a challenge to sustain the clubhouses in the state they are, and we have to make decisions, tough decisions, as we do in every area, but certainly tough decisions every year as to where to spend our capital dollar.
Councillor?
Thank you. And would there be any difference if we suggested a strategy such as golfing pays for golfing and clubhouses play for clubhouses? How would we think differently if we were looking through that lens?
Mr. Stafford?
Through the chair, that's certainly an option and a review that we can have as part of the report back. So it's, I mean, right now the revenue that's collected in both the clubhouse and the golf course pays for the system as a whole. So in essence, the money that does come in is paying for both those two items. We don't separate them out at this point in time. If you look at you know, whether it be a retirement party or a wedding or something that occurs, or the food and beverage and merchandise sales, we don't separate those out right now. We use those to sustain the golf system as a whole.
Thank you. Councillor Van Holst?
Thank you. It's good you brought up merchandise and concessions, because I noted that as a ratio of the fees and memberships, the concession and merchandise is about 40% of that from Thames Valley and Fan Shop, and only 24% at River Road. So if it was functioning at those same levels, there'd be about $50,000 more revenue coming in. So obviously there's some potential there if we look at it differently. You know, for people who don't know, the heyday, these golf was able to contribute maybe $1 million into other things such as aquatics. If we were to say, hey, we're going to let you have that $1 million to pay off a few losses in the bad times, that would be 14 years for River Road. So I certainly think that it deserves another look at, and the golfers deserve a chance to participate in a public meeting. So thank you for everyone who's come out tonight to show your interest. I'm pleased to see that my colleagues are going to support a motion to give you an opportunity to have your say, and let us know what you think about golf in London, and provide some ideas and insights into how we can move forward in the future. So, thank you, Worship.
Thank you. I think we're going to find that out in just a moment. Colleagues, I short-shrifted Councillor Lehman in his questions. He still had another couple of moments here, but he wants to reflect on another point. Back to you, if I might, Councillor.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. I just wanted to point out, golf sometimes can be viewed as an elitist sport, and on my comments for junior golf, right now it costs less to play golf if you're a junior than it does play house league hockey.
So noted. Any other comments colleagues wish to make? Councillor Hopkins, is this a question to staff? I'd cut him off, which is why I went back, but do you have another point?
Yes, thank you for allowing me a question through you to staff. And just following up on staff's comments about clubhouses in the other golf courses that we have. I know I read in the report that they will be looked at, and I wanted to know when that report will be coming. Is that going to be part of the option one here tonight? But having, I think it's fair to say, looking at our clubhouses that do need repairs or need upgrades, what are the opportunities for those upgrades, looking at restaurants, community centers, and having better use? I just want to know where this report for the clubhouses will be coming to us and where that would be.
Mr. Stafford.
Through the chair, it will be a consolidated report. So even though it's not particular around River Road, we will have a discussion around golf as a whole as part of that report, rather than bring back two reports. They do work as a system. It's important that all the information comes back together. That's our intention.
Councillor. Thank you. Any other comments or questions? Colleagues, we have 2.2 on the floor, and I'll remind everyone as we vote on these that one of the options here is presented is to hold a public participation meeting as well, where individuals who are interested will have the opportunity. Date and time to be determined. You can get that information through various social media, through the city's website, or through your ward councillor. And at that, seeing no other comments or questions, I'll turn your attention to the screen as we vote.
Closing the vote, motion passes 13-0 with 1 recuse.
Thank you. I have no scheduled items on the agenda. Under items for direction, first 4.1, page 93 of your package is the confirmation of the appointment to the Argyle BIA, and you'll note that we've been asked to approve the appointment of Donna Morenhout, owner of Razor's Barbershop. Is there a mover? Councillor Lewis, is there a seconder? Councillor Van Meerbergen, comments or questions? Then I'll turn your attention to the screen as we vote.
Closing the vote, motion passes 14-0.
Colleagues, we have an added item with respect to electric buses. I'm going to put it on the floor with a mover and seconder, and then if there's discussion that follows from that, I'll look for a mover, please. Councillor Squire, seconded by Deputy Mayor Helmer. Comments or questions? You'll see that's the package that was added, the one sheet that is there. Any comments or questions? Councillor Squire.
Yes, I don't want to speak too long, and I'm hoping it won't be too long a debate. I'm really pleased to have this at council. One of my other jobs right now is to be chair of the LTC, and at our meeting last month, we approved the report that's set out in the motion to look at the electrification of our system, what's involved, what has to be done. And just in terms of timing, so if anyone has that question, this will be a report that will be prepared and done by the end of July, and it'll be at the commission on the schedule for the August meeting. So we'll have some answers by then about what's involved. But I think the key component is, and what I'm most pleased about is that the London Transit Commission was working on this. In November, a motion was brought to the commission to look at electrification. The mayor made his announcement at the State of the City address. And now what we're doing is bringing both groups together. Everybody pushing in the same direction on this particular issue. And we're proceeding in really what is a prudent and careful manner to determine what's involved in doing this. How can we do it? Where's the money going to come from? What are the operating costs? What are the implications for the LTC and for the city? So this is, in my view, the right approach when you're facing something as large as this. I'm particularly pleased, of course, that we're not looking at taking money out of the LTC budget for this or the other plans that we have for transit. And just so we understand the good work we've done in the transit area, we've added 90,000 new service hours in transit since 2015, 30,000 hours on our specialized service, which are people who have the most need of transit. And I think we should all be proud of that because the council ultimately provides the funding. So I'm enthusiastic about looking at the electrification of our transit. But just my final words will be to everyone out there who, because I heard people at the public participation meeting on the budget saying, this is great, we're going to have electrification. Hey, get on a bus right now. If you get on a bus right now, you're going to do a lot to help us generate money for new transit initiatives, but you're also going to be contributing to the climate emergency that we've been talking about, because the numbers that I've seen indicate that public transit contributes less than 1% to the total emissions that we're so concerned about. So I want to thank the mayor for reaching out to the London Transit Commission. I want to thank the deputy mayor for actually bringing the motion to look at electrification at the London Transit Commission. So it's a cooperative approach. I'm really proud of that, and I hope you'll support this.
Thank you. Other comments or questions? Councillor Morgan.
Yes, I want to thank my colleagues for bringing this forward. I agree with everything Councillor Squire said, so I won't repeat any of that. I'm supportive of 1, 2, and 3. I do have a question about part 4, which is the city funding the cost of the electrification study. I'm not necessarily adverse to that. I'd just like to know, do we have a sense on what the costs are? And I guess another question is, why would the city fund the costs if it was a process already initiated by the Transit Commission? Again, I'm not adverse to it. I'd just like to understand why would that be the case?
I'll turn that over to staff to start, and then we may share some of the response to that. Ms. Barbone, do you want to touch on that? I know we've had some chats with staff on this, but I think the other component, if I can add, is that we know that the range, give or take, I think was about $83,000 to give you some figures for that as well. And it was certainly my suggestion that we would consider taking this out of a reserve fund, specifically the Economy, Efficiency, and Effectiveness Reserve Fund, which would have no impact on the staff levy, or the tax levy. But Ms. Barbone, could you comment further?
Through the chair, just to add, my understanding is it's approximately $83,000 plus taxes for the cost of the study. What I can confirm is the EEE Reserve Fund, which is referred to here, that's our short form, does have enough money to fund that should council wish to approve paying for the cost of that study.
Thank you. Councillor Morgan?
Yeah, and again, I'm not adverse to it. I think the study needs to be done. It just seems to me a little bit odd that we have an $83,000 ask from the Transit Commission for a study that they've already initiated. If they require the money because it's going to impact their operations, I'm certainly supportive of that. I think they've got big budget asks, and we'll have a debate about supporting those, and those are important discussions. And I certainly don't want to impact the operations of the LTC. I just want to make sure I understand why it would be coming after the fact, and I'm sure there's a very good reason for it, and I'd be happy to support it. It's just my understanding of the process and the way that it unfolded, that's all.
Just to bring clarity to that, I might bring the Deputy Mayor into that for his thoughts on it.
Certainly. Well, the letter couldn't come before the Transit Commission approved going ahead with the study, so that's why the letter is after the fact. The EEE Reserve Fund is being suggested as a source of financing because, similar to how we used it to finance the replacement of the streetlights, so you do a capital expenditure up front, it saves you a bunch of money over the long term. That's really what this fund is for one-time investments that pay off over the long term, and it seems like electrification of transit. I mean, that's the general idea, is put some money in up front and lower your operating costs, especially when it comes to energy over the longer run. So seems like the perfect source of financing. The Transit Commission doesn't have a similar source, like a reserve fund for that purpose. And so I'm suggesting that it would be a good idea. Certainly it's got enough money in it to cover $83,000 plus tax and then some. I mean, EEE is a pretty well endowed reserve fund.
Councillor Morgan, back to you.
No, I was just looking for some details on that.
Councillor Squire.
No, I'm fine. The Deputy Mayor addressed the issue sufficiently.
Any other comments or questions with respect to this? Councillor Van Holst.
Thank you. I'm happy to support this. Councillor Squire made some great arguments through you to your staff. I'm just going to presume that whoever conducts the study is going to work closely with London Hydro, we would probably look to provide charging infrastructure, but perhaps a comment about that from our staff.
Well, actually, why don't I start? I've had a very preliminary discussion with London Hydro, but very preliminary. I think the intent is that what this would do, this would include all the appropriate potential partners in this discussion to determine what the roles would be and some of the cost implications of all this. And I think, as has been already noted by previous comments, this is going to be one of those issues that we want to make sure that we go through this process with eyes wide open. And I think that is the intention. And all the players, including London Hydro, would be consulted. I'm not sure that staff would want to add anything more to it than that, but that would be absolutely my expectation as well. Back to you, Councillor.
That was a fine response, Mr. Mayor. And your comment about eyes wide open is great. I know that there's communities moving out of electrified buses, those moving in, the technology is changing. The future has got some great things in front of us, so it'll be very interesting to read the report when it arrives.
It sure will be. Thank you. Any other comments or questions? I have no one else for the speaking list, in which case I'll call the question.
Closing the vote, motion carries 14-0.
Colleagues, I have no deferred matters nor additional business, so I'll look for a motion to adjourn. Excuse me, Councillor Hopkins, seconded by Councillor Lewis. Let's do a hand vote on that. All those in favor? This meeting would be adjourned. Thank you all.